Datin Chan from Sri KDU. You know what she told me? Dato Sri Idris, when you go back to your office in Putrajaya and have discussions with the Prime Minister and Minister of Education, for goodness sake, she said, don't go and tell them to change the curriculum. We are tired of you people in Putrajaya. Every time there's a new minister, every time you come with an education blueprint, the first thing that you do is to say, let's change the curriculum. We are so tired of doing that because there's nothing wrong with the national curriculum. What is wrong with it? We are not.
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon and this is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father-son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, and faith. You know, a couple of episodes ago, in fact, actually many episodes ago, we talked about, your thoughts on university models, tertiary education. Yeah. But now thinking back, maybe we jumped the gun a little bit. And I thought it would be good to talk about the importance of both primary as well as secondary education. What are some of the things that we observe, as well as recommendations as well?
Actually, quite a lot of our viewers, our subscribers have also said that we should really have an episode that covers both primary and secondary education. It's very, very important subject. My views on this subject, I do agree, it's very important. You know, I remember when I was appointed as a minister in the government, there was a big public perception survey that was conducted by the government then. And at that time when the survey was done, overwhelmingly the majority of Malaysians had placed 6 items as the national key agenda, which we then call national key results areas. One of them, among the 6 items, was education. So overwhelmingly in Malaysia, as any other place in the world, if you ask parents, what's on top of the agenda for them, for government to transform, other than cost of living issues, putting bread on the table, education will be also on the pedestal.
Yeah, exactly. And rightfully so. I mean, I really like this quote by Abraham Lincoln, who says that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will become the philosophy of the government in the next. So I think it's very apt that you're talking about what do we desire for our governments to do? Because actually, education addresses the root cause.
Yeah.
If we're able to address issues at the root cause, at the level of education, eventually the long game of that is that then informs the shape of the government of the future generation. Yeah. Very similarly, we have the same thinking in a church context as well. Much of our church's growth has come from 2 key pillars. One is a course that we do called Alpha, but the other one is actually the focus that we place on our children's ministry. Sometimes it can be easy to forget about that because that is the less visible thing that happens on a Sunday. Most people are in the main hall and then their children get sent to another space. But actually, we've realized that when we started to put a bit more attention on the children's ministry, what that would then do is we started to get a lot of people that would come to church, not necessarily because they as parents made a decision to want to come to church, but because maybe for that week, one of their kids followed a friend of theirs to church, to the children's program, and they really enjoyed it. And then they would come back and say, hey, today so-and-so took me to church. I really liked it. Can you start taking me as well? And we have since seen actually the church grow because of that. And not only that, we have now, because the church is 10 years old, we have also seen a lot of these kids that started out in that program now starting to take on some leadership roles in our youth programs, for example. So starting to become more front-facing now to the rest of the congregation. And as a result, actually shaping a lot of our thinking as well at a leadership level. So I think that's why it's important. Maybe we can start by thinking, we talked about the importance of primary and tertiary and secondary education. I think no one will really argue with us on that one. But, maybe let's now talk about how.
How?
What are the things that we can do now to ensure that we have the right policies and the right tools in place for our teachers as well?
Yeah. The interesting thing is in the year 2009, when I was a minister, I had a conversation with our Prime Minister and also the Minister of Education at that time. What is the best approach for doing this? I said the best approach is to get some of the best people that represent our headmasters from primary and secondary schools, and also students, representative from the students, and the teachers, representative from the teachers, as well as the parents. And if we get these people together in a lab, we will give them the challenge. What are the recommendations that you put forward together in the next 6 weeks when you are sitting down together and have a heavy-duty discussion? What are the recommendations to transform both primary and secondary education in Malaysia? And that's what we did. And for 6 weeks when the labs was run, it was the recommendations were quite simple, but almost cut through the chase. The first recommendation that the lab put forward was that we should rank all the schools, primary and secondary schools in Malaysia based on the education results over the last 10 years. We just take the results, public exams, subject by subject over the last 10 years, and put them in pivot table and rank them from number 1 to number 10,000 for each of the secondary primary school. And so we did that. And having now done that, after we've done the ranking, the second step was to identify the top 1%. And so of the 10,000 schools that were ranked, there were 128, if I remember, schools that were in the top 1%. And then after we've done that, we then launched a kind of investigation as regards those schools. What are the things that they're doing that make them unique and so special and good compared to any other schools? And so the most important thing that came out from the view was this. It debunked many of the myths on education. And
what were some of those?
One of the myths everybody says is that, the reason why education is not good in primary and secondary school in Malaysia is because the curriculum is no good. But the point is, all the schools have the same curriculum.
Right.
And how come the 128 are better than the rest? So it's exactly the same. The second myth is, they said, the schools are not good because the facilities are poor. When we looked at 128 schools that were top performing schools, the facilities they have were varied. Some are good, some are bad, and some are ugly. It's got nothing to do with the facilities. And the third aspect was, it's then to do, they said, to do with budgets. There are not enough money that is given, but the budget is the same for the schools, 128 and the rest. But the question still, how come the 128 are better than the rest?
Right. In this is a separate ranking for national and international, private and...
Together. We rank them all together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're interesting. And so after we've done that, when we then began to analyze it, it became very, very clear amongst them, there were the 4 things that were critical, core success factors. Number 1, the quality and the role of the principals. Number 1, that's the key. It's almost like a very important component. If you have a good principal in that school, chances are you will have a better quality of education because that's the role of leadership. Very important leadership. But when you then look at the principal's role of the principal, it isn't just about the principal doing anything that he or she willy-nilly wants to do. It's focused on structured pedagogy. This is very important. That means a method of teaching. All these 128 schools, when we interviewed the principals, it was very clear that they were focusing on the best method of teaching, not trying to change the curriculum, not trying to do many, many different extracurricular activities. And one good example was, I visited in that year, in the year 2009, when there was a PISA exams and TIMSS exams, the highest performing school in Malaysia at that time, based on the results, was Sri KDU.
Okay, interesting.
So I visited Sri KDU. I had a 1-day chat with the principal. Her name is Datin Chan. And
the principal then?
Yeah, at that time. And and I asked her, what is the thing that is special that you guys are doing here that you feel the other schools are not doing? You know what she said? Come to my conference room. I will show you, she said. We went into the conference room. line up on the entire long conference table were the manuals on teaching. I said, this is the reason why our school is doing well. What we basically done, we found out who are the best geography teachers, who are the best maths teachers, best history teachers, and we codified the teaching method in these manuals. And every school holiday, she says, I, Datin Chan, insist that every teacher comes to the classroom during the school holiday for 2 weeks to prepare for the next term.
Yeah.
And the people that teach the teachers to prepare is the master teacher in mathematics, master teacher in geography, using the manual. And they must be completely satisfied that the teachers are ready to teach based on that structured pedagogy for the next term. And that's, remember, Leon, this is school holiday. And most of the teachers would prefer to go out and take their leave. But she insists that the success factor relies squarely on the ability of the teachers to follow the best teaching method, to teach the same curriculum as the rest. So that's what she's done.
Basically institutionalizing the method, and the practice,
the
so
best
that it's
method.
streamlined across the board. And I think that's good, because that also means that, the next thing that I think a lot of quality education hinges on is the quality of the individual teacher.
Yeah.
And you hear so many cases of
Correct.
maybe when the teacher leaves to another school or maybe retires, the standard drops. Now, obviously, you will have some of that as well. But I think when you have a very set play and a structured pedagogy, as you mentioned, that it limits the variables.
Limits the variable. You're absolutely right. Which come to the number 2, the second success factor for school, primary and second, is the quality of the teachers. Not just quality that they have done very well in university, but they're following the structured pedagogy, that's best practices, and they're sticking with it. And that's the experience in the 128 schools that were interviewed. And so it was very, very important. The quality of the teachers. I mean, when I say teachers, this is not about whether the guy got first class honors in education, but a teacher that follows the manual, the best practice manual, day in and day out, every single day do that. And that is the thing that is making huge difference.
Yeah. I think the ability to follow something to the T, that also speaks into building up one's character, if you like. Martin Luther King said the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. And then he adds on, intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. So what we are doing now is we're encouraging teachers, getting them to model thinking intensively by looking at this structure that's in front of them, but then also requiring them to be very diligent in fully understanding and adhering to the program. And I think there's something to be said about, in order to lead well, you have to first learn how to be a follower. And we see that modeled in the Bible as well, because if you've been able to follow a structure, to follow a program, that gives you then the ability to teach and to coach others, whether it's team members or students, to do the same with the structures and systems that you have put in place.
Yeah. Let me now turn to the third success factor, is the role of parents. Because the role of parents is critical in making sure that the students study at home, focus on their homework, finish their homework. I mean, it's such a simple thing. If only parents every night sit with their kids at home, sit with them and help them to make sure that there's discipline in doing the homework, that will make a huge difference. I went to another school in Sekolah Ulu Lubai. This is a very remote school. In those particular years, when we were doing the study, they were among the top primary school in the whole of Malaysia. It's a rural school. It's a 100% Iban school.
Yeah.
Very rural. And this debunked one of the myths people say the quality of the facilities.
Right.
This is a rural school, Sekolah Ulu Lubai, flooded 3 times a year, and they are studying in these dilapidated schools, no way like any of the modern schools in town, but they're one of the best exam results.
Yep. And this is ranked, to be clear, among the international schools, among the other private schools. It's not a separate ranking.
And by the way, if you don't believe me, if anyone listening to this, I can tell you, you'll be amazed if you ever visit that school. The number of awards they have won, it has exceeded the room. In fact, they posted them along the corridors to the school. I went and visited it. I was totally amazed. I told the Minister of Higher Education, Tan Sri Muhyiddin at that time, "Sir, I suggest you visit the school because there's something happening in the school that will open your eyes." He visited it too, and so many people have visited it. It was very, very clear that they were focusing on getting the parents involved. Would you believe it? Every evening, the parents are coming to the classroom together with the kids to do homework. I mean, where do you find that?
Yeah.
The parents are there. The parents are also involved in cooking meals for the kids to study. I mean, this is such an incredible thing that they're doing. But they follow also structured pedagogy.
Yeah.
Precisely what I said before. Let me just tell you a very interesting comment. After everyone was paying attention to Cikgu Jaul is the principal. And so the minister went there, the people from from the Ministry of Education visited that school. They were amazed. They invited Cikgu Jaul, who is the principal, to give a talk at the National Education Conference here in KL. Then he talked about what they were doing and how they were doing it. There was a challenge from the crowd. There was another teacher from Kelantan. He said, "Cikgu Jaul, you are lucky. The reason why your students are doing well is because the kids happen to be just good. You know, can I give you a challenge? I send 20 of my kids from my school, from Kelantan, over to Limbang, go to your school, the ones who cannot read and write. You use your teaching method and to teach them." So Cikgu Jaul said, challenge accepted. So the ministry paid for these 20 kids from Kelantan. They sent them to Sekolah Ulu Lubai. 3 months later, all of the 20 kids sent back to Kelantan can read and write. This is the point.
Were they sent with their parents too?
No, I mean, this is the point. Structured pedagogy is absolutely key. And you know, when I inquired Cikgu Jaul, maybe you're lucky, like the teachers that you have here happen to be the good teachers. No, Idris. Every 2 to 3 years, people in Putrajaya send to me, he said, new teachers, good and bad and ugly, they all come. But when they come here, the first day they step into the school, I tell them, whatever you've been taught, this is the way we teach our students in the classroom here. These are the methods, these are the manuals, these are structured pedagogy. You're going to learn how to use this, and this is how we do it here in the school. And that is how they make a lot of difference. And fantastic things that they're doing out there. So I'm totally convinced the importance of parents. Now, the fourth most important, I covered number 1, parents, or the headmasters. Number 2, I covered teachers. Number 3, parents. Number 4 is the most important because the center is the kids themselves. The children themselves. If the children themselves don't have the desire to learn, it's very tough because the principal, the teachers, and the parents are focusing their efforts on the center of this. If you like, the universe, the center of the universe, if you like, really is the kid. You have to encourage them, nurture them, make them want to study, and that is it. Actually, all the listeners that are out here, if I ask you, any one of you, do you remember in your time when you were primary school, in your secondary school, who are your top teachers that you can remember? I can assure you, you will name them. And if you ask you, what is it so special about that particular teacher? I can assure you, you will say, it's the way he or she teach. That's structured pedagogy.
In the same way, you will also remember your worst teachers.
You will also worst. And because that's the key. And that's why I would say today, remember always, please, this is Datin Chan from Sri KDU. You know what she told me? Dato Sri Idris, when you go back to your office in Putrajaya and have discussions with the Prime Minister and Minister of Education, for goodness sake, she said, don't go and tell them to change the curriculum. We are tired of you people in Putrajaya. Every time there's a new minister, every time you come with an education blueprint, the first thing that you do is to say, let's change the curriculum. We are so tired of doing that because there's nothing wrong with the national curriculum. What is wrong with it? We are not focusing on the things that I mentioned before, structured pedagogy, getting the principal and the teachers to focus on the best. And this is the key. And so she said, please, please, and please. Because every time you change the curriculum, we have to change the teaching methods to adjust according to that.
Yeah.
And we have to train people how to do it. By the time 2 or 3 years is lost because of transition. And so I think the kids, it is very important. That's why the role of the parents, the teachers, and the principal is to inculcate the hunger amongst the kids so that they want to read.
Yeah, but ultimately, children can't exactly do that without the influence of the teacher and the parents. So I even question whether the children should even be bucketed here, because actually a lot of that is dependent on how well the parents are able to, like you say, inculcate this desire for learning.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, to your point, if you think about the children being the sun, S-U-N, and then the planets are revolving around it.
Right.
The three are the planets, the principal. So if you could say they are different. In fact, in the center of it is the sun, and the planets revolve around it. But they're all focusing on encouraging the kids to study. So I would say today, the center of it all is the kids. But the role of the parents, the role of the teachers, and the role of the principal are focusing on really getting the kids to study and learn, and make it interesting for them to study and learn. This is key. And to my mind, this method is very good. And we did this. After we did that study, so those in the lab, they recommended that this, so we then in the lab recommended that we create a school improvement toolkit. School improvement toolkit, exactly how this will be rolled out. And so when this was rolled among all the schools in Malaysia, both primary and secondary schools, so after the lab was completed, we rolled out the school. So all the plans were implemented by the schools. It was quite incredible, the results. You remember I said the lab was conducted in 2009, and in 2010, all the way to 2016, every single year, we were tracking the results. We ranked all the schools every year during that time. From Band 1 and Band 2 are the top performing schools. That means students with very, very high grades. That number had increased from 1,770 to 3,980 schools. There's more than 100% improvement in the number of schools where the students have done very well. And that's why they jump into Band 1 and Band 2 based on the exam results, public exam results of the school. So it's more than 100% improvement. Let me talk about the worst performing school, the Band 6 and Band 7. In the year 2010, there were altogether 636 schools that were in Band 6 and Band 7, the worst performing school. That number had dropped to 199. That is 70% improvement. So you could see in a very short period of time, the results were really outstanding. And so a few years ago, in the year, the year 2016, when the United Nations commissioned a very big study by United Nations Education Commission, chaired by Gordon Brown, he then set up representatives from many countries. And so I was appointed amongst the high-level advisory panel for this committee chaired by Gordon Brown to look at some of the best practices. And I actually wrote an article on the method that we use here and that it was impactful in the things that we were doing. And so it's been included in the report that was there so that it is then disseminated across many countries. They were really amazed at the results actually. And it's unfortunate for us in the year 2018, there's a change in government. As soon as the change of government, this entire program was just deleted.
The baby was thrown out with the bathwater.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I wrote that also in the article that I put out there, and that there was a reason that a wonderful method that was delivering results in a very short period of time was actually put aside. Simply because it's a change of government.
You talked about syllabus earlier, and I agree with you. There shouldn't be, I think generally speaking, people should not default immediately to wanting to change a syllabus, But I think that now, looking at our current landscape today, do you think that perhaps some of the ways in which, and this is not just the Malaysian syllabus, I think I'm now talking a bit more broadly in terms of global approaches to education, primary and secondary. Do we feel that maybe some of the teaching methods are perhaps a little draconian today in a creator and in an attention economy? Should we not be putting a bit more of a focus in a bit more vocational learning embedded into a school syllabus?
Leon, the answer to me squarely lies in going to the top 1% of the schools and asking those teachers who are doing really well, how are you doing it? And if you do that, the answer is right there. You don't have.
Are schools really doing that though? That's the thing.
That's the thing.
Schools are not, maybe as extracurricular.
This is quite simple. We did it in 6 weeks, Leon. You don't need 6 months to do it. So when we look at the exam results of all the schools, you immediately know which is the best school and which is the best subject in that particular school, and you can pinpoint the teacher actually, because these are the teachers that making a huge difference. So when you interview the teacher, because time and again the same teacher, the kids are doing really well in the exams, and when you sit there and talk to them, whether it's draconian or not draconian, it's all there. And so when we did that, it was so simple. It was completely revealing.
No, I agree with you. If you're just looking at it, if you're just basing it on the metric of exam performance, then of course I agree. Now, looking at, just taking a bit of a tangent, general philosophy to education, regardless of results, do we feel like, because there are a lot of people that believe that the current education system does not prepare children for the real world. So for example, people would argue that, the current narrative is that schools teach you how to be part of a machinery. So you learn how to, eventually you're told that after you graduate, you find yourself a job. But there's a lot of people who are challenging that notion now. Like, I mentioned the creator economy, also many people wanting to go into entrepreneurship. Does our education system prepare us to understand how tax works? Where does money go? How do banks operate? Because I personally feel that I had to learn that much later in life. And I also, and sometimes I disagree with some of the arguments for this, but I agree with quite a lot of it actually. How can we encourage children to think a bit more broadly from a younger age?
Well, I mean, I know where you're coming from. In fact, in the study that was done in the lab, when we interviewed those top performing teachers, it was very clear that they were not just teaching the kids rote learning. That means memorizing it only. But they were telling them the why. Because the critical thinking is about the why, not just the how and the what. And so a lot of the teaching method focuses on making the students understand the reasons why these is to be approached in this particular way. So the why is very important. Most of teachers in the schools that are mediocre, they focus on rote learning. Just focus on getting the kids to memorize it. Because when you can memorize it, very soon after a while, the memory will fail you, it's gone. But if you make them understand the reasons why, then you can connect the dots. The critical thinking comes a lot to do with the ability of the kids to understand the reasons behind why a certain thing works in a certain way. And that's why the teaching method that the best teachers do actually encourages a lot of the critical thinking. Because they said must focus on the why, and that's what's sadly missing in a lot of teachers. That just simply say, rote learning.
Yeah.
And they are very, very clear that the best teaching method must really bring in the critical thinking so that they understand the whys. And so, as I said, we only did this in 6 weeks, And so, to be very clear, those were the steps that were taken, and the results was outstanding. No doubt about it. But I can tell you the negative side was this. There were lots of complaints from some of the parents that said, there are a lot of stress that's being put amongst our kids now because they now have to do the homework simply because we rank all the schools and we publish the ranking of the schools as well. So if you're the principal of a school that is bottom rank and you put at, band 7 amongst the school, the parents will start querying you as a principal, what are you doing? And the teachers as well are being stressed. But my point is this, if you want to transform education, you cannot do it without ruffling feathers. There will be people that are complaining that there are stress that is being put into it. But that's transformation, that's change that is required. And people want status quo. They want no change to take place in the school. If you want no change to take place in the school, there's no better outcome that will come out from it. So it's very important for me, in my mind, that we should understand that there will be change that will come out. The improvements will come out when there is pain associated with the change process. But you have to manage the pain and explain to them it's the outcome that is good. And it's great pity that we stopped doing this. And we have something so simple that is put out there. We call it the 7 steps that are very important for us.
Yeah.
If you ask me today, Leon, if I was to recommend to our Minister of Education, what would you recommend? If you ask me, this to me is quite simple. Step number one, rank all the schools based on public exam results. Number 2, take the 1% of the schools that are high performing, top 1%. Number 3, send a team of people to interview the best teachers and the best principals in those schools. And number 4, having now done that, produce what is called a school improvement toolkit, the manual on the structured pedagogy that is to be there. And then roll it out, the SIT, school improvement toolkit, roll it out among all the schools. And number 4, train everybody for the implementation, how this is to be done. Number 5, you make sure that you rank all the schools at the end of each year. After you rank all the schools, number 6, reward the high-performing schools and provide remedial training for the teachers that are not doing so well. And number 7, publish the results of the schools so that it's widely put out there. And that's the one that causes a lot of stress. And when you publish it, band 1, band 2, you put a lot of kiasu spirit amongst the principal and the teachers. I can tell you it will be astounding, the results. To me, no silver bullet inside this. The reason why I like the approach that we did at that time was, unlike many, many countries that attempt to make improvement, you know what they do? Or look at Finland, look at Singapore. But when you start looking at the way, you know what? The resistance from everybody is, they are different countries, context, we are not them. The beauty today is that this is not Finland, this is not Singapore, this is Malaysia, this is a 1%, this is all the schools that are in Malaysia, the same facilities, the same curriculum, the same teachers' pay, everything is the same, but how come they're doing well? And this is what we really, you remove all the excuses. It's very clear to me, if you remove all the excuses, everybody said, if the school is Sekolah Ulu Lubai, who's flooded 3 times a year, poor facilities, rural school, and if they're doing so well, we have no excuse. In town, in many other schools, we have better facilities, better quality teachers. How come they're not doing so well? This is the key. You remove the excuses. And I'm totally convinced there's a silent revolution out there from a very simple practical approach that we started in 2009. And if we continue to do that, we'll do very well today. I'm no doubt in my mind, if we continue to do that, we will do very well. It does not cost us a lot of money, Leon. It didn't mean that we're going to revamp the school, build new halls, beautify the building. Nothing to do with that. Structured pedagogy doesn't cost you money. This is a very, very simple thing that you were doing. No aircon that was put out there, no new bicycle shed that was put out there, no new books was introduced, nothing of that nature. It is simply identifying the best methods of teaching amongst the best performing schools, and then disseminating that amongst all the other teachers, and the principal insisting that the teachers do that day in and day out. This is how you do. I mean, the saddest part is that just last year, I was just reading the article. For the 4th year running, Singapore is ranked number 1 in the world for TIMSS, Trends for International Mathematics and Science Studies. 4 years running. I mean, the reason why I say Singapore, not Finland, because they were same country before.
So what's their secret sauce?
Same thing, structured pedagogy. They do exactly the same stuff. You know, I have no doubt that there's nothing wrong with our curriculum. And you talk to Datin Chan, Sri KDU, she says, you know what? Why do I say nothing wrong with our curriculum? Because our kids in Sri KDU, they're given the option not only just studying our national curriculum, but at the same time to sit for the exams at all levels. So our kids, when they are in Sri KDU, they have the option to sit for the national exam, but at the same time the O levels and the A levels, and they do very well. There's nothing to do with the curriculum; it's to do with the teaching methods. So, guys out there, if you are a parent, I encourage you to play your part. Every night, sit there with your kids to make sure that he or she does his or her homework, and encourage them to do that. And make sure your parents every night do that, and every day. When you look at with the report of the kids, do they do the homework? Have they studied? Have a proper constructive discussion with your teachers. Make sure you put the teachers under pressure to do their job, and talk to the principal as well. And if you are a principal, a teacher out there, find out amongst your classroom, if you are a principal, who is the best geography teacher, who is the best maths teacher. Identify that person. Get someone to sit with that person to produce a manual. And so that you get all the other teachers in your school to use the teaching method day in and day out. And I tell you, if you start doing this, you will start a silent revolution in your school.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think the parent's role is also, yes, to make sure that your child does their schoolwork, but I think also then to maybe address the earlier question about what about the stuff outside of the curriculum, real world stuff. I would say then if the school is not offering that as a subject, so let's say at primary school or secondary school level, there isn't a subject specifically on coding. I think us as parents can play that role in developing an interest in some of these other things, you know, explaining to them how the world works, for example, what happens to your money. I think all of that, we can take responsibility for that. And I think there's ample resources on YouTube. I mean, my daughter has learned so many things that even I have not taught her, or the school have not taught her, just because she's been exposed to stuff on YouTube.
Absolutely.
The other day she called out a parallelogram, which, you know, something that even I had forgotten about, and like the teacher was surprised as well that she knew about, and all of that is because of YouTube. So I think, you know, yes, the onus is on us as parents to be able to facilitate some wider learning for our kids, but the encouragement to any parents who might feel like that's too much of a large undertaking, there is so much out there to assist you. I think actually our job is more to create the interest and then allow other forms of resources to then do most of the heavy lifting, with us obviously moderating.
Last week, you may recall, Leon, we had an episode on this parenting issue.
Yes.
And we then discussed the Australian ban on kids that are below age of 16. And again, my message to parents out there, if you are a parent, your role is to make sure that you listen to our episode that we put out. Start out there, and we say there are the 4 phases of the kids growing up, and your role is to exercise situational leadership.
I guess the key takeaways from today are really, if you are a teacher, if you are the principal of a school, encourage structured pedagogy.
Absolutely.
If you are the Minister of Education, who may or may not be listening to this, we've given you, I believe, 7 steps today, 7 recommendations for hopefully things that can maybe be considered for the future of our education here in Malaysia. And then finally, the role of parents. Parents, we encourage you, including this is also to myself, by the way, to play an active role in our kids' development. Just very curious to close, maybe.
Yeah.
Can you share? I really like this quote by William Butler Yeats, who says that education is not simply the filling of a pail, but rather the lighting of a fire. And I'm curious for you, was there a particular teacher or was there a particular time in your kind of schooling where you felt like a fire was lit?
I have been very, very fortunate. My dad was a school teacher, primary school. He taught me in the classroom, and there's no escaping coming from back home to continue and do my homework. Every night, my dad sat with me and made sure I did my homework while he was checking the homework, the results of the other teacher and preparing for the next day. This was every night. And
so how was the fire lit?
The fire was lit simply because he encouraged me. He talked about this idea of kiasu. And he really lit the fire by saying, son, the word ketui is a Klabit word that's similar to kiasu, burning desire to win. And I also had many other model teachers. And I can give you one example. Margaret Lim. Margaret Lim was my teacher for literature in Form 4 and Form 5. She was an incredible teacher. And she said, I wanted all of you to improve your vocabulary. And this was the thing that she did. And I thought the teaching method was totally outside the box. He says, this chapter, this book, I want all of you to read it next week. And every single one of you read this chapter. If you don't understand any word in that chapter, check the dictionary, write down the word in your book and the meaning of that word in the book. It was a simple thing he wanted. So he said, I'm going to ask you guys next week. So he said, Leon, the word because. What's the meaning of the word because? If you know the meaning, but you cannot explain to her and you did not write it in the book, then you have to stand up for the whole classroom, the whole 40 minutes. You stand up. The next question they ask you, Leon, I asked you because you didn't know the answer. There's this word that is inside there, the meaning of conflagration. And if you cannot explain, you didn't write it down, now you have to stand on the chair. The third question is you are now standing outside. She was draconian. I mean, this teaching method is, today, nobody like this method, but I can assure you, the vocabulary amongst the kids, our understanding of the word, the precision of the understanding was over the roof. Because that method was so useful among the kids that's there. So many of us who studied literature, as we studied literature, we did As You Like It with Shakespeare, we did Far From Maddening Crowd, Thomas Hardy, and we did Rustam and Shorab. I can tell you, the bonus was, because he was also our English grammar teacher, our vocabulary was exponential. I mean, this was the teaching method that was so simple and effective.
Right.
I can think about, I don't think that any parent, any teacher that I remember that does something like that. But this lady, she was scary. Very, very scary, because we were so frightened of her in her method of teaching. Almost radical.
Yeah, it's interesting to mention because there's so much, as we become increasingly woke, there's also an expectation on teachers to not be overly radical or not overly scary. Even this translates to parenting as well. Andre and I also subscribe to this thing called gentle parenting. But there is something to be said about maybe not to use the word scary, but maybe the key here is authority. Because authority can come in different ways and forms. Authority can come in the shape of being kind of a scary presence, but there can also be a kind of gentle authority. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because if I think back, actually a lot of my most formative years, or the teachers that I remember the most or had the most direct impact in shaping me, were the ones that I was slightly afraid of as well.
I remember, I tell you one story. I mean, one of our classmates at that time, his name is Stephen Liben. And then Stephen, if you're listening out there, we were so frightened about this. So he said, I had a discussion with a form teacher. She said, Margaret Lim, I wanted to change my subjects, and I didn't like this particular subject. I can't remember. I said that I didn't want to do history. I wanted to shift to do geography. And so he went to ask the form teacher, Margaret Lim, the famous, the scary lady, that she was going to do that. And he said, Margaret Lim asked Stephen, when are you going to tell the teacher that you are going to change? Have you told the teacher that you're going to change the subject? His reply was, he said he was so scared. I am going to tell her. I'm going to tell her. Margaret Lim said, Stephen, the best thing to do with you is to tie a stone around your neck and throw you into the Baram River. He was telling me this story because he was so scared of her. I am going to tell her.
Yeah, but I suppose why that works is because dealing with maybe some of these teachers that you were a little afraid of, they weren't if they had done their job correctly, they would not have purely instilled fear in you, but the fear, basically, that would have led to character development. There must be a character development element to it. Otherwise, it just becomes pure fear-mongering, which is also ineffective. But it goes back to this combination of intelligence and character. In the same way, that William Butler had that quotation about not simply filling a pail, which is perhaps the intelligence part. You're filling your brain, but then where is the character development? Where is the lighting of that fire? And I like that imagery because that suggests that if we encourage our children, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent, or whether you are as a kid are listening to this. We do have, actually, by the way, a 12-year-old came up to me the other day at a wedding and said, I like your podcast. So there might actually be some of you listening to this right now. But, if we're able to combine both the intelligence plus the character, that essentially creates the flame. And why a flame is, I think, perhaps a more useful imagery for the importance of education is that by being a flame, that assumes that you have now the ability to multiply and to stoke other flames as well. And you use the word configuration, that then amounting to a configuration. And I think why that's important is that we also talked about changing landscapes. I think if we have this multiplication idea for how we begin to shape a nation by way of education, educating ourselves, educating others. If we look at ourselves as a big configuration, then actually we are not at risk of being put out by the winds of change, because what happens with a flame when there is wind, the winds of change will actually, if we do our jobs correctly, cause the fires to grow and multiply even further. And that is how bushfires start. And so I think it is hugely important for us at all levels to take education seriously.
Absolutely.
Whether it is in a school or if you are not able to go to school, if you are not in school, then your own self-education.
Absolutely.
And there's so many ways for us to be able to learn right now. The choices are truly truly immense. And so I think for all of us listening today, let this be a reminder to continue our pursuit of lifelong learning, as we have often spoken about. And so on that note, we just want to say thank you for joining us on yet another episode of The Game of Impossible. If you've liked this conversation, and in fact, if this is your first time listening, we encourage you to subscribe to both our YouTube and our Spotify. We upload episodes weekly, every Friday at 6 a.m. We also have short form content on both IG and TikTok at The Game of Impossible. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.